50% of women abandon their careers in tech by the age of 35.
We think that's unacceptable, and it's exactly why we started this podcast.
I'm Jo Keneally, tech veteran and writer.
And I'm Jarisha Nadaraju, product ops leader and startup advisor.
We're The Other Half, a podcast for ambitious women navigating their way.
This episode is brought to you by PCX Pay, helping businesses move money across borders with speed, clarity, and control. Simplify your payments infrastructure at pcxpay.com. We've partnered with Clue for Season 3 of The Other Half. Clue is the science-backed period and cycle tracking app that helps you understand your body, from cycle predictions and hormone insights to fertility tracking and mood patterns. As a listener of The Other Half, you have exclusive access to a whole free year of Clue Plus. Just head to the link in the show notes to claim it.
On today's episode, we're joined by Jennifer Fang, product leader, coach, and trainee therapist. We discuss her transition from tech to therapy and how Gestalt therapy can help you navigate work, people, and yourself.
Jennifer, welcome to The Other Half. How are you doing?
Thank you for having me here. I'm feeling excited and grounded at the same time.
Those are two very different energies, but I would trust you to embody both of them, being excited and grounded simultaneously. Jennifer, we know each other quite well, and we'll get into all of that. But to start us off, let's just talk about your career, right? You've had a career that spanned strategy consulting at McKinsey. Then you went to product at sort of high growth fintechs like TrueLayer, which is where we met you. And now you've decided to take a year away from that successful career in tech to train as a Gestalt therapist, which is a very bold decision. And I know a lot of people who think about doing things like this, but they don't ever quite take that leap, to the next thing and say, I'm going to do this and commit to it. So what was that moment of realization for you, that made you decide, I'm actually going to do it now? And how long had that been building in your mind?
It's very hard for me to pinpoint a specific moment. I think it is more like a long time coming. I've always been interested in human connections, enjoying all this connection, and that's how we make friends with each other. It's genuinely, I really enjoy the authentic human connections. So I've been studying psychotherapy off and on since 2020 into different modalities. And this diploma I'm completing, which is qualifying to be a BACP therapist, I actually started in 2024. And from 2025, September, is basically my last year of qualifying to be a therapist. I've been thinking about very practically in the beginning. I thought, well, I have a full-time job. How do I want to compress hours? Do I want to do it part-time? Can I make it work practically? Then something hit me. I have been working non-stop for 10 years in different jobs, always from one goal to next. I've never really taken a proper break. I've never really say, you know what, let's take a step back and see whatever's out there. And I'm super curious about what drives people when we're not working just for money, who we become when we don't have job title, the prestigious status associated with it. So yeah, I thought, you know what, the time might not come back. Despite all the trade-offs, let's see how it goes. Hopefully that answers your question.
Yeah, it does. And I was just nodding along there because I don't know, Jennifer, if you found yourself to be quite a high achiever and like a perfectionist in a way, or somebody who is like, climbing this ladder or going towards a goal. But yeah, I think when, at least for me personally, when you've been brought up like that, like the next step, like you got to go and think. And as I'm in the, when I'm currently in a thing, I'm already thinking like of the next thing and all of that. But it was, towards a very specific career trajectory. Yeah, it's hard to think, oh yeah, I have been doing this for a while, Don't I deserve a break or a chance to really explore what it is or pause and think about that? So I think many, especially women, find themselves in that position. So yeah, it completely resonates. And on that, I guess, Jennifer, I'm curious about is, how are you thinking about this year? You're taking this time off. I think what you've told me previously is that it's going to be a year that you're taking off to complete this training. So is it a break? Is it a pivot? Is it a parallel path? Is it something else entirely?
It is very hard to define and put it in a very simple label. I just started this year thinking it as a year of experiment, meaning that, you know what, I want to try things out and not only see how I actually behave in a therapeutic setting, do I really enjoy the job? So, taking on clinical placement as part of the obviously qualification requirement, going to supervision, learning through experience, that itself is an experiment because I don't know whether I would enjoy being a therapist. And so far, that experiment has been satisfying. I've learned so much, and there's definitely up and downs in the journey, as anyone who's starting a new job, really. But second of all, I'm also exploring different opportunities in tech related areas. So, you and me, Jerisha and I, started the Her Next Big Thing workshop and pretty much a community as well. Is basically to connect with those people, those women like us who are high achievers, who somehow really beat themselves up for things that is, looks within their reach, but somehow they're not there yet, or feeling stuck in the moment. So we actually run this workshop together as part of the experiment to see how we can help those women who is feeling stuck in their career in a holistic way. Help them in a holistic way rather than just, you know what, this is your next goal, get that promotion. It can be a promotion, it can be a pivot, it can be anything. So I'm doing a lot of experiments writing on Substack, coaching people as well on the side. So far, I would still call this year a year of experiment, but somehow I would say it's definitely added layer into it. With I am approaching the end of my course, with my hours accumulating, approaching a qualification. Really, this is so much more also uncertainty there. I have to say, like, I arrive at the stage that is with some answers, but with more uncertainties and questions to explore.
And that's a really interesting space to be in. I think you're learning while you're doing, and you're still navigating and showing up, and in a way trying to help others navigate this path that you yourself are on at the moment. And yeah, I love that you mentioned her next big thing, which is our workshops that we run for women in tech and other industries who are at this crossroads, at this point where they're thinking about things and not quite sure about what the next step is. And one of the reasons I wanted to partner with you, Jennifer, was because of this really interesting background that you have, which is Gestalt therapy, right? It's therapy informed techniques. And you've guided me through a few sessions, and hopefully we'll be able to go touch on some of that in this episode. But I think it's a very unique take on what is usually quite a very like rational and logical and theoretical way of thinking about decisions in life. So that's interesting. And I love that you mentioned experimentation. We had a previous guest on the podcast, and Laura, who wrote a book, Tiny Experiments, and a whole thing was about, having this experimental mindset. So it's a great one to have.
Yeah, we're definitely big fans of experimenting here. You mentioned there that, it's hard to put a label on this year and that it's many different things. But you have, accumulated a career of nice labels, shall we say, or prestigious titles for a better term, Oxford grad, you strategy consultant McKinsey, you were at very well-known startups in the London ecosystem. Before you took this year, was there any out, or it's not a year out because you're working very hard, but before you decided to make this change, did you have any concerns about how the decision would be perceived by others?
Absolutely. I'll be lying if I don't have any concerns. I would say one of the main concerns that I have is on people's perception, really. On, you know what, she's completely hating tech. She's like leaving this life for good. She's become a therapist. I don't know, maybe someday she will become a spiritual leader. I don't know. People may think differently. So I did have a concern because like for anybody who has been in corporate world, we all know that it's important to build a good personal brand, right? And what is personal brand is people's perception on you. Of course, the true part of you manifesting outside, but it is also people gonna perceive you differently. So yeah, that's definitely one of the concern that I have start this year really.
How did you work through that?
Well, I wouldn't say I really worked through it. I think I'm arriving at a point that I'm holding this, staying with it, rather than saying, hey, I definitely don't have the concern or people won't perceive me in different ways. I rationally know that I cannot control other people's perception. What I can do is to focus on the things that matters. For example, I actually see this opportunity not as a full exit from my old life, more a compound effect, really. Because, I trust you guys all watching the AI space every day, right? And you probably hate hearing this two-word AI now. I have sometimes have this reaction towards it as well. But it is in fact really key. If I stay in the old tech career, I still need to reinvent myself in one way or another. Like everyone out there in this world, this is not about, oh my God, I'm being so anxious. Yes, there is definitely anxiety. I have that too. But I feel like in this AI world that, robot or machine is becoming more human, but somehow human can become more robotic. So I feel, what? Therapy training is valuable. It's not only valuable to helping other people building connection, but it's a necessity, it's a necessary skills for any sort of work out there. So I do see AI or tech in a sense has a really good combination with therapy. So one of the things I tried in vibe coding was to build a female diet app for PCOS. So that one, when I was building the app, I was thinking about the therapy skills that I learned from a CBT or Gestalt perspective. How can I actually not just hate my craving, but also be friend with it? And how can I leverage the things I learn to multiply the effect that I can have from tech? So yeah, I say these two worlds actually overlap or compound very well.
I would agree with that. I think, Jerisha, you have this phrase which is like 100% human that you use sometimes. And I think now that we're in the age of AI, which I've heard being called the age of ambiguity, I think being 100% human is really, really important. And those skills you learn in therapy will definitely play a part in what everybody will need in future, because actually if AI is going to automate all our jobs, and that's still TBC, what's left is how we relate, how our judgment, how we decide what to do, right? Which kind of brings us more to the therapy point. So I'm sure all our listeners are familiar with therapy in general. We've probably watched Shrinking on Apple TV. If you haven't, it's quite good. But, can you give us a little bit of an overview of what Gestalt therapy is specifically and explain it to a 5-year-old type thing?
Yeah, I've been asked a lot this question actually, because I think when people talk about therapy, we have an idea about this, I don't know, a lady wearing in pajama, have like a big framed glasses and started like analyzing you or nodding enthusiastically or having a bit of an expert view of what you should do or what you should think or what is the solution to your life. Gestalt therapy is actually quite different in the sense that we don't see therapist as an expert. We very much bring ourselves in, almost as a much more equal power dynamic with the client and explore things together. We try not to assume things. We try to explore not just the words clients say, but also how they say it, how their body feels, how they behave in the moment. Any sort of information are important information. And we also work very embodily. So it's not just cognitive thinking. We analyze those things are important. We also incorporate that in Gestalt therapy as well. But we're also looking at how our feeling manifests in our body in a somatic way. How can we notice things in the present moment? It is almost like mindfulness. And when we're doing meditation, we notice things coming up, the thoughts coming up, how those feelings are manifesting in your body from moment to moment. So we treat that as information as well. And I think most importantly, we see things are connected with each other and human not as a fixed thing or fixed self. We see ourselves manifested differently in different environment with different people. So we work very relationally. I'll give you an example. A lot of people think about anxiety as something in us that is fixed. However, if you think about anxiety, you actually cannot think it apart from the environment you're in and the people you interact with. Then some people, when you interact with them, you feel quite calm. There's like barely any anxiety. And some people, when you interact with them, somehow those feelings come up to you. And is that their problem or your problem? I would say there's a co-created reality, co-created experience. So from Gestalt point of view, we examine the whole field, meaning the environment, the people, all the factors and conditions in the environment together. And last but not least, Gestalt actually is a very integrative therapy. So if a hundred Gestalt therapists will be 100 style of Gestalt therapy, and we also borrowed a lot from Eastern philosophy, and that's where my roots are. So from Zen Buddhism to Taoism. Yeah, so I guess hopefully this is something more relatable to you now about Gestalt therapy.
Yeah, it's really interesting, Jennifer. And I think you've explained this to me, not in this level of detail, but when you mentioned Gestalt before, the key word or phrase I took from it was, I even wrote it on a post-it. You said Gestalt almost makes you think like we are off the field, like, or
Mm-hmm.
we are part of this field. And
Mm-hmm.
I love that because it almost says that the way you are and how you act and how you feel and all of these things are so dependent on like these situations or these environments or these places that you find yourself in. And in a way that struck a chord even of, the companies that we find ourselves in, like where we go, our work environments.
Mm.
What we're exposed to in one environment can be different from another. And so, we are off the field. We're not like fixed. It can depend on where we are, which is so interesting. But Jennifer, what was the reason that you were drawn to Gestalt specifically compared to any other approaches?
It's a very good question because I did have a great survey of different modalities. I even took different modalities intro classes. I think Gestalt really touched me is essentially philosophy. I'm a very kind of philosophical type of person. When I read Gestalt philosophy, I was like, oh my God, that's exactly how I think about this world. So I say the world view alignment was really crucial. But second of all, it was the embodiment element. It was the almost like we can feel each other when we sit together through our nervous system, through our presence, through our energy, not in a woo-woo way, but how we sense the world, how when the awareness was sharpened, that I can really relate to other people in an embodied way. And that really touched me in some of the practice I did. So yeah, in that from that moment I was like, this is it. This is really a great modality for me and I want to try it out.
Very interesting. I guess it just depends, yeah, what people are drawn to, and then you pick it, and then you're on a certain path, and that's what you end up exploring. And we've spoken a bit about the theory of Gestalt, but one of the things we want to do with our listeners is actually give them practical, sort of actionable techniques that they can use in their day to day, and especially in their working lives. And so Gestalt places a big emphasis on self awareness as one of the things that you mentioned. So, where would you start with someone to build more of that? And I guess, is there a live example or something you can do with us now and with our listeners that sort of demonstrates Gestalt?
Yes, I would say, yeah, I would definitely invite maybe two of you together if you're willing to. to do an experiment, see whatever comes up. So one thing about the show is it's not really about fixed techniques that people can try. Yes, those are important. For example, if you look into trauma therapy, EMDR, or that, those are quite helpful and evidence-based as well, techniques that people can try. In Gestalt, we incorporate them, but it's more of a mindset and attitude that and it's an experience that we co-create together. So this experiment I would invite you to do right now is really just to arrive in the moment. I know we have been talking, but have we really arrived in the here and now? So I would invite you to take a deep breath, and if you feel comfortable, close your eyes and really get in touch with the chair supporting your back, your foot touching the ground, taking a big, deep breath, noticing how the air touches your nostrils, goes through your chest and your belly. See whatever emerges in you. It could be a thought emerges in your head. Just observe it. It could be a feeling in your body. Could be a trembling feeling. Could be a tension somewhere. Could be your skin getting in touch with the breeze. Notice how that sensation changes. Is there a color? Is there a shape? Is there a visual images? Just be curious and see how that moves in you. Whenever you're ready, you can open your eyes and arrive back to the room. So I'm curious what emerged in both of you.
For me, the minute I started that exercise, there was this like immediate shift in how I felt. So obviously we're on a podcast, so there's like an element of, being in performance mode. And as soon as I started the exercise, I felt like immediately grounded. Um, and like within a few seconds, which was quite interesting. And I definitely felt a broader awareness that I didn't quite have while we were just speaking to each other here. So yeah, it was really interesting to see that immediate shift.
Where do you feel the ground?
So it was almost as if like my body was like getting a little bit heavier and like just like feeling the force of gravity, but in a good way, if that makes sense.
I see. Like a force of gravity that you're feeling in your body. And if you have a image comes up to you, how does that weight feel like?
Even though I felt the force of gravity, I felt lighter for it. So that was like an
Hmm.
interesting contrast. And then I didn't see any images, but I felt like a circle in my throat, if that makes sense. Which was like
Ah,
quite interesting as well.
a circle in your throat.
Almost like a
Ah,
marble, but it didn't hurt. It was just there.
like a marble. I'm very curious about how the marble reside in your throat. Does it change? Does it move?
It did dissipate after a while. Yeah, it was there, and then I noticed it, and I was like, okay, I'm not going to try to force this or push it away. And then it just kind of like dissipated up and down at the same time.
Up and down. It feels lively. The energy feels lively.
Yeah, but like calm liveliness, if that makes sense.
Calm liveliness. A bit of playfulness, because I hear a bit of playfulness. It's
Yeah,
almost.
it felt like a bit of a release, I would say.
Huh. Huh. Okay, a release. That is rich information. What about you, Jerisha?
Yeah, I'd say similar to Joe, I noticed the shift, Jennifer. So I think it was when you said arrive, like you said, and you said specifically, like, let's actually arrive. And like Joe's saying, we're in podcast mode. So we're both speaking to our guests, we're keeping track of time, we're looking at questions. Make no mistake, like when you're doing a podcast, you're on, like you're switched on, right? Because there's a lot of things to manage in the background. And a lot of it is very much like living up here in your head, right? You're in your mind, you're like juggling stuff. So when you said arrive, I felt like I also just like, oh, okay, hold on, let's actually just come here to this moment without having all the tabs opened, like literally and metaphorically. And yeah, same thing. And so but I've told you this before. We haven't done a similar exercise, but it's something, about awareness. And I felt the heaviness and the weight, but it is almost always just comes up on my shoulders, I think, for me. And it almost feels like, oh, there's just the stuff, and so almost like when I'm there. And for me, I don't know, I imagine that it's all these things that I'm holding and I've got going on. And obviously, when you just kind of pause, you feel like all the different things that are there. So I think for me, that's kind of what I felt in going through that.
I was very intrigued by your analogy of closing tabs. I wonder if you can do it right now. And if you can do it right now, how would you do that?
You mean in my mind? Like, yeah, I mean,
How do you closing tabs? And when you close the tabs, pay attention to how that manifested in your body. And
oh, you
just
want
see
me?
whatever happens. Yeah.
Okay, I'll
Just
just.
try a little bit and see if, yeah, if anything.
So one of the things I saw in that is I could see like you see light behind your eyes. So it was actually like colors. So it was very brief that I had my eyes closed, but as I was doing that, there were like colors coming up, which was interesting. And I don't know if you're putting this in my mind or I'm actually feeling it, but I do feel, I mean, I don't feel as heavy as I was feeling just earlier.
That is interesting. Yeah, I'm not doing hypnotizing work for you.
Yeah, what are you doing here, Jennifer?
Wanting seats. I'm just intrigued because when you say closing tabs, that emerged rather figural for me. Something caught my attention. So, and then you mentioned about your shoulder. So I wonder what happens. Is another experiment, a very mini one. I wonder what happens if you close the tabs and really close them and see whatever happens. So that's why I suggested it.
Yeah.
It was a really interesting experience, and I definitely felt, very in touch with my emotions and my thoughts. And but one of the things about when you're in the workplace is you often can't close tabs in the workplace. And I know a lot of women in tech, and certainly I have felt this, often feel like we have to suppress or hide our emotions in the workplace. So whether that is like you need to hide your frustration or your anger in a meeting, maybe you got like hurt by a comment and you kind of have to hide that in, because we're all trying to be professional at work. And that definitely feels like it has a cost. Certainly I feel like exhausted by it sometimes, but I guess from your point of view, does that suppression, like, does it have a cost physiologically but also professionally as well?
It is a very interesting question. And if you're interested in kind of mind, like well-being work recently, even if you read like Body Keeps a Score, that type of book, right? We talk a lot about mind-body connections. And in Gestalt specifically, we're talking about cycle of experience and cycle of energy. So in plain English term, that means whenever we start doing something, we have energy to mobilize so we can take the action. But when those energy cannot be mobilized because we are suppressing it, and a lot of the times it's actually for very good reasons. You want to protect yourself, right? Especially in the situation that you feel not safe or you feel being judged, and that's very natural response. But the energy doesn't go anywhere. That reside in our body, that kept somewhere deep. And sometimes our body really remember it. It's like, and that's actually part of the reason why Gestalt therapy works so much on our body, because a lot of the time, the memory we work on is not just cognitive, it's a body process. So only when we actually take notes of those and release those energy properly, somehow mobilize them, we can actually go back to the full circle rather than get stuck and keep going back and keep getting stuck to mobilizing our energy to do some sort of action. So again, I'm not an expert in physiological health, but I would say yes, there's definitely harm in it. And otherwise, where do you use those energy? We're basically wasted all this energy holding our body with no outlet. From a professional point of view, I actually think a lot of the times so-called professionalism is also a creation of the field we're in. So I would say what I observe is sometimes in short-term point of view, yes, when we suppress our emotions, it seems to be worked. It worked. You know what? I avoided this conflict. I avoided this seemingly dangerous pressure. But from a long-term point of view, resentment grow. You started to disengage with the work. You started to don't really care about it as much and feels like everything's meaningless. Why am I here? Started to have burnout symptoms. So from a long-term point of view, it actually costs us as well professionally. So yeah, I would say there is harm, but I have to say I'm not here saying, you know what, whenever I feel the emotion, you just release it without thinking about the consequences. If you hate that person, if they cannot tolerate this colleague, just speak to their face. I'm not saying that. I think there is a way to really get in touch with your thought, hold it, being with it, and having a constructive, I mean, I hate use this word constructive because I have a lot of a stigma towards it, but having helpful conversation, I would say, with peers, with your manager, with people around you in the right condition with enough support, because without support, there won't be contact. So I think those are the things that I would say to this kind of situation.
That's really helpful. And you're right, we can't just go around saying, the unfiltered truth in the workplace sometimes. And sometimes because actually it's not, truth is always a bit subjective, especially when it's your emotional truth. And actually our frustrations are often, or, our anger or, any sadness we feel is often actually us projecting rather than the situation itself. I'd be curious, do you have any exercises or suggestions about how we can actually move that energy from our bodies? Because if you can't work through it straight away in a meeting, is there even a small technique that you would recommend that people can do after work, for example?
Yeah, I think there's many techniques you can do, but going from the basis of taking notice, I think a lot of the time that we don't want to dwell on things, so we escape. I think distraction is good, is helpful, is one way we adjust to creatively adjust to our environment. And in Gestalt, we actually don't see things as disorder or anything. We actually see it as a way that we creatively adjust to the environment we were in. And sometimes when the environment changes, but our way of adjusting to the environment becomes fixed, and that's when it becomes harmful later. So we're basically restore the flexibility of our way of dealing with the environment from time to time. So in terms of mobilizing energy, I would say start with noticing, right? Start with, you actually care about yourself the most. Don't let your emotion go without noticing them. You don't need to do anything about it immediately, but just really, we've demonstrated together, take a 5-minute break in a place that you feel safe and really get in touch with them. And if tears come out, if you want to shout, find a place to shout that is appropriate. If you want to cry, yeah, cry. Let the emotion pass. You're gonna survive this. I know sometimes it doesn't feel like it when it become really catharsis, but you will, like we always have. So staying with it, it does take a lot of practice. It's not very easy. Another way I would do is also find a way that suits you the best. It could be journaling your emotion out. It could be talking to some trusted ones. It could be going to therapy. It could be going to a yoga class. Whatever that works for you, that can allow you to live in the present, mobilize energy physically. Because I actually find movement very helpful. Either it's a fast walk or even go to the gym. That really allows us to actually mobilize energy. Massages as well, and that's why like a lot of people told me that they actually cry during massage sometimes because those deep unprocessed emotions can store in our muscles somewhere, and then when the knot was unknotted, you feel the flow.
Really helpful. Yeah, power of like movement, even just getting out for like 5 minutes, like at lunchtime or in between meetings, can really help. Like I've noticed I just come back a different person. That could just be 2 minutes in the sun. You've touched a lot on this already, but I guess I'd be curious to know, do you have any specific advice on how women or people generally in the workplace can have a healthier relationship with those difficult emotions? Because it can be hard, right? Sometimes like crying, it can be hard, or so do you have any advice around that?
Yeah, I think there's not a fixed way to do it again. I'm only speaking from experience that I think a lot of the time, again, we need to examine the field around us and see what kind of support we have internally and externally, right? So different individual is different. So if you feel that you actually don't have much of a support network around you, build them. And I think one way to do that is to be authentic and vulnerable with people. I'm not saying you should be vulnerable with everybody. Of course, there is a safe container needs to happen. There's relationship needs to be built there. You need to trust each other, and that is hard. But sometimes I notice once I step the first step, that's a permission and an invitation to others as well. So I feel like the support network around us is very important. And again, something is about building up internal support, trusting our own agency. And sometimes I found, if you look back in your past experience, those difficult moments you have went through yourself, what has worked for you? How did that work? What can you learn from it? Like I said, everybody has their different way to deal with emotions. What are those ways that worked for you before? I know sometimes we have a bit of amnesia, like, we went through the difficult emotions and we just forgot about it completely. But yeah, I think there is definitely a way to recall them, to really examining how we felt in those moments and what helped. I would say slowing down is a key. So, like when we were triggered, it's very easy to just like go to the top of the emotion, very fast acceleration. And that's why I feel sometimes when you catch yourself in those moments, take a deep breath, take a step out, really slowing down, take notice. And if you can't process immediately, that's fine. Remember that when you feel safe in the environment, start to examining those. What patterns in the past have you been activated? Is it familiar to you? And really understanding, I don't know, sometimes understanding the other party as well, if it's allowed, of course. What triggered them, perhaps? How are you created this together? So I think, yeah, those would be the points I would think about.
I think that's great advice, Jennifer. And as you were talking, I guess I was definitely thinking about what you're saying is stuff that I've experienced in work environments specifically. I think for me personally, some of it is that awareness of myself. I say also maybe when I was younger or early on in my career, if I got frustrated by something, I was frustrated, like, and I would immediately go to the top of that emotion, like you were saying, and almost also like act on it, faster than I should, like not sleeping on it, not thinking about it the next day, not being able to almost like de-escalate myself from that moment. And I feel now the thing that hasn't changed is I still feel it. It's not like you're going to magically not experience bad moments or get frustrated or any of these things. They still happen. But for me now, I think I'm aware of it and I try to get curious about it. So I'm like, okay. And I know my triggers also, like, you have certain things like face flushed or something's happening or whatever. My body is telling me that I'm in this state. And so I immediately know, oh, I'm there. And for me personally now, I know that that's also a state where I should never be, in further engaging in a conversation, sending out emails, doing anything until my body has told me that I'm out of that state of emotion. So I think, it's not perfect, but I'm learning how to navigate that also in a healthier way with, still observing and having the emotion be there, not getting upset with myself for feeling it, because what's the
Correct.
point of that?
Yeah.
Yeah, so thank you for sharing that, Jennifer. I think that's a very interesting perspective. And I think a lot of, especially women, navigating the workplace can sometimes feel like, they're told they're too emotional and stuff. And that's not what you want to hear. And it can lead to them suppressing emotions.
Yeah. And I think another thing is sometimes, we blame ourselves when we act out immediately of our emotions. And I think one thing is, there's no, whenever we think about should, that is a outside concept embedded in us, right? In Gestalt, we call it introject. So even when we act out, so what? Yeah, there is consequence, but blaming myself will not solve the problem. So I want to also say, if you can't slow down immediately, that's where you are as a person. And paradoxically, only when we really accept where we are, we can become where we are, where we want to be, actually, paradoxically. So the more we fight it, the less we can win it. So that's why I want to point this out, meaning, yeah, maybe have more empathy towards ourselves.
Great advice. We don't do that enough. We definitely, a lot, well, I say we, but maybe it's just me or other people. I don't think we talk to ourselves in a way that we would, with a friend or something like that. Sometimes we can be so negative and hard on ourselves for just being and existing. So yeah. Jennifer, Gestalt therapy also focuses on the quality of our relationships and the patterns that we bring to them. You mentioned a bit of this about sometimes, having amnesia maybe about the things that we do or don't do. But, the workplace is full of complex relationships. With your managers, with peers, with direct reports, sponsors, lots of different people and things to navigate there. So what does Gestalt thinking teach us about why we repeat certain patterns in our working relationships, even when we know sometimes that those patterns don't serve us?
Like I said earlier, it's we creatively adjust to the environment, right? And when those strategy worked before, we sometimes keep them. So, for example, if you were always in a very competitive environment, or you're moved by your parents' external validation of saying, great job, you obviously will keep doing it, will keep achievement at a central point of your identity because that's how you associate value with. So that definitely works. It definitely can make like land you the job you want, go to the school you want. But it can become harmful fix later on in the life when, for example, there is so many different criteria of what it means to be valuable or successful, or there are so many conditions outside your control that you're not determined. You can't choose which family you're born into, for example. You can't decide, I don't know, if tomorrow's gonna rain. But we fail to realize them, we still keep this old pattern. And that's sometimes actually what leads us to burnout as well. We're trying to reach the goal, the forever next goal, because achievement is so central to our identity. And that is a fixed gestalt or a fixed way of adjusting ourselves to the environment, how we relate to the world. And to your question about how we actually navigate that in a way in complex relationship in workspace, I think for the audience to this podcast, or all of your environment can be very competitive, can have political complexity, can have all this pressure that you're under, and everyone has their own goals to reach, right? So I think that basically created so many different conditions in the field what I would suggest would actually to examining those conditions. What are the constraints that you are in at the moment in your current environment? What are the conditions actually supportive for you? Who are your sponsors? Who actually really care about your success? And also internally, how are you relating to yourself? What do you associate your identity with? So once you kind of doing it almost like deliberately, strategically, some of the information can come to you quite naturally, right? And another point of view is to understand your counterparties, who you're dealing with, and really understand where they come from, what's their goal, what do they need, what's their fear, what's their hope, and have those candid conversations. Again, those are two-sided, so sometimes you can't really just have this candid conversation if just you, because maybe the other person have their own pattern to navigate, right? They have their own fear to navigate. But sometimes just be aware of that can give us a space to the situation immediately. Because you immediately think, okay, this person reacted this way may not because they really want me harm. Perhaps it comes from the old pattern, very underlying drivers that they have been for decades, right? Again, this does not make certain behavior acceptable, but just really being aware of that helps ourselves to keep a distance to the environment without being overwhelmed, right? And when we can hold ourselves being with our emotions and the conflict and tension together with other people, that's when we can actually start our next step, right? So slow down again, being aware again, being intelligent, not just cognitively, but emotionally.
Yeah, Jennifer, I'm really curious about whether, with if you notice a pattern in somebody else and you can see that they are having sort of an emotional reaction and it is impacting you because you're on the receiving end of this and you're not quite sure, exactly what's triggering it, or maybe you're curious and you want to try help them so that you navigate it and can work better and have a relationship where they're not, having these emotional things and whatever in the workplace, because that can happen. Is it on us, do you think, to raise that with the other person, or should we just be aware of it and to think about how we react and not try to have that discussion with somebody else?
I think it depends on the relationship.
Mm.
And there is not a standard answer here. I would say stay true to yourself. Do you really want to help that person? And help not in the way of saying, oh, what you should do, or this is what you should notice. But if you, for example, really care about this person, for example, you could gently point out some of the pattern. Oh, I noticed when you do this, right? You don't have to give any sort of explanation. Simply just point them out could be helpful, and depends on the person how they receive it, right? They like I don't think personally it's your obligation to educate the other person. And also we come from our own biases. Their reality could be very different from ours. So in a way, I think there's certain danger there if we think, oh, you know what, I know exactly what's going on from the other person. This is exactly the pattern. I would say before you jump to that conclusion, actually have a conversation with them and understand what their experience really like. And maybe through that conversation, you could have a more helpful exploration together rather than out of blue. I fed up with you. I've noticed you've been doing this many times. I'm gonna, let you know I'm fed up with you. So I think you're coming from a bit different places there, and depends on the strength of the relationship. The context could be very different.
So interesting. Jennifer, I've loved, and I think Joe has also found this just really interesting about taking almost this therapy and Gestalt lens to how we navigate work and show up at work. And it's just really interesting when you think about what everybody is dealing with and bringing all these different perspectives and ways of dealing with things to the workplace. But we are at time, and I want to ask you one final question, which is if a listener takes away just one thing from this conversation, one idea or practice that they can start using this week, what would you want it to be?
I would say be kind to ourselves. I know it's a bit cliche, but it's from a different perspective. From the perspective that we as a person is not fixed. We as a person is impacted by everything around us, and we are of the field, as you said. And one thing maybe can take away is to give ourselves permission to notice and to respect how we actually feel, and see whatever emerges with curiosity. And I think that's key, rather than thinking what I should do, switching the conversation into how am I doing it? How the feelings manifested in me. I think how question sometimes is more helpful than the why question.
I have gotten so many takeaways from this episode, and before we wrap up and I start asking myself a lot of how questions, of which there are many to ask, what is the best way for people to get in touch with you, Jennifer?
You can contact me through hernextbigthing.com. And there's actually our website on Her Next Big Thing. It has all my information there, such as my LinkedIn, my Substack. There is also my email address. You can get in touch, which I will share with you guys. And you can ask me any question about therapy or coaching or anything in life. Really, I'm very open and curious about your experience too.
Great, we'll definitely add those in the show notes. Thanks so much for joining us, Jennifer.
Thank you for having me. I really enjoyed it.
Thank you. If you enjoyed this episode, please rate, review, and subscribe. It really helps others find us. Even better, share it with a friend or colleague who needs to hear this. Thanks, and see you next time.